What's up, HighFlyGang? It's your boy Birdie. We are back again with another reaction. Hey guys, today we are doing something different. Mostly on this channel, we are doing music reactions. But as I told you, from time to time, we can go off a little bit of the road and do something different than music, like some maybe movie reaction, some documentary reaction, something educational. As I said, I'm open to reacting to anything. So yeah, this was requested under the comments, one of the music reactions I do on certain artists. Somebody recommended this to do facts about slavery never mentioned in school. Thomas Sowell. So I suppose Thomas Sowell is the guy who is doing YouTube channel, doing these topics. So yeah, I'm here for it. Before we jump into the video, should I say a little bit more info? What I remember from school about slavery. I know slavery was abolished in 1865 or 5. The Civil War, correct me if I'm wrong, the Civil War was, from 61 to 65. And 65 was officially abolished, the slavery, yeah? Let me know in the comments if I'm wrong. I don't know. Since we are talking about, about history, let me tell you something about me. I am from Europe. I am a European, specifically in the Balkan region. You know where the Balkan is. I'm from country Montenegro. Montenegro is officially part of NATO pact. So we are kind of, in relations. If you never heard, because a lot of foreigners never heard of my country. Although in my town, in Montenegro, Budva is a tourist place, and the town lives only in summer season. We have a lot of American tourists, Europe, Asia, but mostly Russian and Ukrainians, But in general, we have tourists all around the world. So yeah, let's jump right into this. Before we get to the video, I want to give a shout out to my bro Anysay for doing thumbnails for my videos. So if you guys need thumbnails, if you have a YouTube channel on your, or you decide to open one, you need great thumbnails, you can hit him up on his Instagram. I will provide the link of his Instagram page in the description box down below. Also, I just started Patreon. Like yesterday, it's a new thing to me. I put like a minimum of $3. That's the minimum as you can put in the settings. That I was thinking about $1, but I put the 3. And I put that you can request 2 reactions a week, 8 per month, exclusive reaction content, and help a lot of donations, so you can support the channel that way as well, Okay, let's jump right into it. Let's see what happened. I mean, this is my roots as well. Europeans invaded America, yeah? It was Africans, black people from Africa as slaves, and white European people, okay, who came to the new land, to the promised land. I mean, history is pretty brutal. They exterminated all Indian people and what? And sorry for my English if it's a little bit broken from time to time, I can speak in English really good, but still it's not my native language. So yeah, I had to learn this to speak. So yeah, let's go. Support us on Patreon. Again, it's exclusive content. That's what I have too now. But I have 0 Patreons. Okay. From the book Black Rednecks and White Liberals, Untold Facts About Slavery. They didn't learn in school, okay.
The instrumental use of the history of slavery today also underlies the claim that slavery grew out of racism. For most of it,
if anything makes sense, that makes sense. Of course, racism was started in slavery.
Its long history, which includes most of the history of the human race, slavery was largely not the enslavement of racially different people, for the simple reason that only in recent centuries has either the technology or the wealth existed to go to another continent to get slaves and transport them en masse across an ocean. People were enslaved because they were vulnerable, not because of how they looked. The peoples of the Balkans were enslaved.
That's true. Not because they were black how they look, because they were vulnerable, they were poor, didn't have much options. Take, for example, today's society. You have one black person who is billionaire or millionaire, it doesn't matter, rich, and other white person who is also billionaire or millionaire, it doesn't matter. Put them on the same yacht. It doesn't matter who is the owner of that yacht. There, in that particular situation, racism is not an issue. Racism is for stupid people. One black, one yellow, let's say one Chinese, and one white person. They're all rich on the same yacht. They don't talk about these stupid things. You know, there is no such a things about them, like talking about racism, you know, homophobia, all these things. No. They are equal, and their only common language is, let's make money together, let's make more money. That's only what it is. So yeah.
Enslaved by fellow Europeans, as well as by the peoples of the Middle East, for at least 6 centuries before the first African was brought to the Western Hemisphere.
Oh.
Before the modern era, by and large, Europeans enslaved other Europeans, Asians enslaved other Asians,
Yeah.
Africans enslaved other Africans,
Of course.
and the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere enslaved other indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah.
Slavery was not based on race, much less
So retrospective, there is no one different thing in enslavement. Everybody was enslaving everybody. Whatever you picture in your mind, there was that slave thing.
on
that happened.
theories about race. Only relatively late in history did enslavement across racial lines occur on such a scale as to promote an ideology of racism that outlasted the institution of slavery itself. Wherever a separate people were enslaved, they were disdained or despised, whether they were different by country, religion, caste, race, or tribe. In East Africa, the Maasai were feared slave raiders, and other African tribes, either alone or in conjunction with Arabs, enslaved their more vulnerable neighbors. As late as 1891, it was reported that Manyuema slavers had demoralized surrounding tribes, destroying crops, and famine reigned everywhere. Even in the early 20th century, Abyssinians were still raiding other Africans and carrying off slaves.
Oh my God.
It was 1922 before the British had gained sufficient control in Tanganyika to stamp out slavery there. Arabs were the leading slave raiders in East Africa, ranging over an area larger than all of Europe. The total number of slaves exported from East Africa during the 19th century has been estimated to be at least 2 million.
Oof.
The form in
2
which the
million
story of slavery has
Back in that time, 2 million people. Comparing to today's number, today there are a lot of people living in Africa, in Asia, you know, number of citizens is growing up rapidly. So that is equivalent to today's probably, like if you said in today's numbers, like 15, 20 million people.
has reached most people today
it's a lot.
has been along the lines of the best-selling book and widely watched television miniseries Roots by Alex Haley. Challenged on the historical
Who is
accuracy
Alex
of
Haley? I
Roots,
don't know who he is.
Haley said, "I tried to give my people a myth to live by. This instrumental use of history, or purported history, is open to the same objections as other instrumental myth-making. Despite the impression created by Roots, during the era of the massive slave trade from West Africa, a white man was more likely to catch malaria in Africa than to catch slaves himself. The average life expectancy of an African slave trade
You see, that's what I call you. Karma. It always catches up with you. You know, you do a harm to other, it's gonna get back at you. It will slap you back at your will. You know, that's what people like to hear. People who are religious, who believe in God, believe in good, doing good, the good returns, doing bad to other people, the bad returns to you.
from West Africa
Yeah, because if you're living in one area, one region, you grow up there, you get used to all bacteria and everything, you know, you get resistance. Some white man coming for the first time in Africa, new viruses, new bacteria, everything, he's vulnerable. So yeah, he's most likely to catch malaria before he enslaved anybody.
a white man was more likely to catch
Yeah.
malaria in Africa than to catch slaves
Malaria.
himself. The average life expectancy of a white man in the interior of sub-Saharan Africa at that time was less than 1 year. By and large, men from Europe or the Western Hemisphere came to the coasts of Africa, bought their slaves, and left as soon as possible.
Yeah, so they don't die.
Even so, the death rates among the white crews of the ships carrying slaves to the Western Hemisphere were as high as the death rates among the slaves themselves. Possible. Even so, the death rates among the white crews of the ships carrying slaves to the Western Hemisphere were as high as the death rates among the slaves themselves.
Oh, karma once again. Yeah, it was equal death rate between the slave themselves and the white man trying to transport slaves from Africa to the Western Hemisphere. Yeah, because on the way from Africa to Western to transport, to go and buy slaves on the coast, they go to the coast because they don't want to be on their land, because life expectancy, if they stay on the land, is less than 1 year, because you can die from malaria or other things. So they brought to the coast. Very sneaky move, buy slaves, but still buying and transporting them from Africa to Western Hemisphere is going to have its own, disadvantages on the road. People will die,
It was only much later, after quinine and other medical measures enabled Europeans to survive where there were tropical diseases, was it possible for them to invade Africa in force and establish empires there. But by then, the Atlantic slave trade had already been ended. During the era of that trade, Africa was largely ruled by Africans, who established the conditions under which slave sales took place. The crew of a slave ship was in no position to defy African rulers and their armies by going out across.
Look at these pictures, dude. This is so awful. I never liked watching anything of this, And you can probably guess why. Because I feel bad. Because that was my people that were doing to them, white people. And my roots. British colonized, but not only British. I think the British were the first. See, that's why it's the official language in America, English, because British colonized America. But I think the other Europeans did as well. That's my roots. I'm European, so I kind of feel bad, Doesn't mean I'm guilty, because I grew up today. That was way before I was born. But I also thought about it, what if I was born in that time as a white person? Would I be the same guy who would enslave other black people? I probably will. I probably would. But not because I wanted to be, but because I would grow up, I would be, as a kid, probably learned and educated that way. You are white, you need to do this and that, Probably different time, different education, different learning, different everything. Probably my parents, people around me would teach me as I grow up to do these things, They would put that in my mind as a kid, as you grow up, and then your opinion is informed when you grow up, you're that. They made a monster out of you, if that makes any sense,
Across the land and capturing people willy-nilly. The stronger African peoples captured and enslaved the weaker peoples. The same pattern found over the centuries in Europe, Asia, the Western Hemisphere, and Polynesia.
Oh my God.
In Nyasaland, the Ngoni and Yao swaggered over and terrorized other tribes. In Uganda, the Baganda made life miserable for their neighbors.
Yeah.
And the Nyoro and Hima of Anko enslaved Toro women and children. The Tutsi dominated the Hutu in Rwanda. The Maasai lorded it over the Kikuyu and Kamba. And the latter, in turn, held the Indorobo in a kind of serfdom. It was
so not only that they were threatened by white people to enslave them, but they were also fighting amongst each other, tribes between tribes, but plus added that the white people came with their ships to enslave them, so that's a double trouble.
Precisely the fact that Europeans, except for the Portuguese, seldom participated in the raids that captured and enslaved Africans that enabled most people in Europe and the Americas to remain oblivious to the traumatic experience that this was, with some Africans committing suicide to avoid capture and wives being whipped as they tried to cling to their husbands or children. Historian David Breon Davis pointed out that Europeans had little contact with the actual process of enslavement. and that, as late as 1721, the Royal African Company asked its agents to investigate the modes of enslavement in the interior. Europeans typically saw only the end results, enslaved people being offered for sale on the coast. It was much the same story in the Ottoman Empire, where those who bought slaves had no...
Ottoman Empire. Yes, again, we are coming to Ottoman. My roots were the Ottoman slaves. I'm from Balkan. Ottoman Empire enslaved the whole Balkan region. Serbia, Montenegro, everything around. I'm from Montenegro. A lot of people, I'll have to explain you that. A lot of people, because till 2006, it was Serbia and Montenegro as a republic. After 2006, we got our independence as a country. Now we are separated, but still we are the same people, speaking the same language. The only different thing is that little accent, but we are the same people. Half of the Montenegro people declare themselves as Montenegrin, born in Montenegro, and the other half declare themselves as Serbian, born in Montenegro. Although they never lived in Serbia, or they were not even born in Serbia, they were born in Montenegro, they lived their whole life in Montenegro, but they say they are Serbian who live in Montenegro. That's how it is here. And we were the Ottoman slaves.
No idea what these slaves had been through before. The unique position of the Western world in the history, and especially the destruction of slavery, need not imply that there was unanimity within the West on this institution. In addition to whites who defended the enslavement of Africans on racial grounds, or who opposed general emancipation on social grounds, there were many whites, and even blacks, who defended slavery as a matter of self-interest as slave owners. Blacks who defended emancipation on social grounds. There were many whites, and even blacks, who defended slavery as a matter of self-interest.
I understand for the whites defending slavery, because you have self-interest. It's a cruel interest, but it's self-interest. It's all about the money. Even now, today we don't have slavery list, but today we have modern slavery, which doesn't mean you're gonna go literally enslave other people. You cannot do that anymore. But there are other tough forms and ways of doing which you can say it's equivalent to slavery in that time. Literally, we have some other ways, not so much primitive way, like going literally capturing person, but dude, we didn't get far away from that time. Now we have modern slavery, if you understand what I mean.
As slave owners. Although
yeah, but I said, I traded for whites, but there are even some black people who defended slavery. Probably there were some black people who were slave owners as well, which is crazy to me. Both is crazy, but especially that.
Most black owners of slaves in the United States were only nominal owners of members of their own families. There were thousands of other blacks in the antebellum South who were commercial slave owners, just like their white counterparts. An estimated 1/3 of the free persons of color in New Orleans were slave owners, and thousands of these slave owners volunteered to fight for the Confederacy during the Civil War. Black slave owners were even more common in the Caribbean. In short, there were many defenders of slavery in the West, even in the 19th century. And outside the West, slavery was too widely accepted to require defense.
Damn,
no other nation ended slavery to require...
That's crazy. When slavery is too spread it all over the country, too widely accepted to require any defense. Dude, it's too late. You came too late. It's too late. That's crazy.
No other nation ended slavery in the same way as the United States did, and few ended it after so short a struggle, as history is measured. How and why did slavery end in most of the world? There were two major...
I don't know how and why, but I'm glad it did.
...processes. Over the centuries, as more and more territories around the world consolidated into nation-states with their own armies and navies, raiding those territories to capture and enslave the people who lived within them became more hazardous in itself, and also risked military retaliation against the countries from which the raiders came. Thus, more and more peoples became off-limits to slave raiders over time. Put
Cotton plants. Yeah, that's what slavers that I'm mostly doing. Picking up the cotton.
differently, the areas which
plants.
remained subject to slave raiding over the centuries were primarily those where the people lived in smaller or weaker societies. Such societies continued to exist where it was difficult, for geographic or other reasons, to consolidate large areas under one government. This was true of the Balkans, the backwaters
Balkans. I'm from Balkans.
of Asia, and much of sub-Saharan Africa.
Yeah, that's true.
By the early modern era, sub-Saharan Africa, with its numerous and severe geographic handicaps, was one of the last remaining areas from which vast numbers of people could be enslaved.
Oh, it's the end. I thought it's gonna get like some outro, some conclusion, so I know it's ending. I didn't see it coming in the ending. It just stopped. But it was a great video, educational. I like watching not just about slavery, but anything that is educational, from geography, biology, universe, about stars and everything, I watched that by myself. I never reacted to it. This is my first time doing something like that as a content for reacting. This is my first time. But aside of that, sometimes I watch it for myself, some interesting stuff that you can learn. As I forgot to say prior to reacting to this, what I said, wanted to compare, since we're talking about America and Europe, one thing that I noticed is to the average young person, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, speaking that group, here in Europe, we get abnormal education as in sense of a lot of theory. So after elementary and high school, when you turn around 2021, we are full of knowledge. For the kids that are learning in school, they pay attention. We are full of knowledge. We know a lot of information. We know a lot of things, but we don't know how to live and provide for ourselves. And you're kind of fucked there. In America, they don't feed you that much knowledge. You don't know too much stuff about the world. I'm talking in general how system works in general, here and there. And there, America didn't feed you that much of a knowledge. You learn little things, but they prepare you for the life. They prepare you for one thing you are good at to do. And when you finish, by the time you finish high school, you turn 21, you can move out of your parents' house and you can provide for yourself already. And you know one thing to do. And here, kids in the Balkan, I'm talking about the Balkan here, where I live. A lot of kids are stuck with their parents until they early or late 30s. That's how it is. In a lot of cases, although some young people until their 30s make a good living for themselves, they can live on their own. They have enough money to live on their own, to get married, to have kids, and they still in the end decide to live with their parents in a big house. That's how it works here. I'm almost 30. I work over the summer season. I have souvenir store. I make good money. I work over the year, and I still live with my parents because I choose to. I love family life. When I feel like I'm being bothered, I want to get married and move out, I will do that. But now I'm feeling good, That's how it is. Which is in America, that's not like that kind of a normal thing. Like you're turning 18, you're moving out. That's not how it works here. Here, when you turn 21, you're still a kid and you don't have a chance of surviving on your own here. Because that's the system, how it works here compared to America. In America, you're ready. Here, you're not. That's why I compared. Average American kid, average European kid, especially average European kid that comes here from the Balkan, knows 10 times, at least 10 times more than average American kid in the knowledge from geography, biology. And I witnessed that. But when it comes to the living and surviving, American kid will much more better survive than European kid. He's already 21, he's out, he can do that. Here you cannot do that. So there are advantages and disadvantages when it comes to American system and European system. That's what I want to say. Okay guys, this was it for this video. If you have some more recommendations, leave them in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you like the content. Also, You can join my Patreon. The Patreon link will be in the description box down below. I would greatly appreciate that if you help us support a little bit the channel, and see you in the next videos, man. Stay fly.